Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all our participants in Malaysia and the region. And good morning to all of you who are tuning in from the UK as well and in Europe. I hope everybody is safe and doing well today. My name is Daniel Lee, and I'm the Public Affairs and Government Relations Manager of the PMCC, and I will be your MC for today. Welcome to our third day of the Malaysia Climate Action Week, co-organized by the British High Commission Kuala Lumpur and the PMCC, with the theme Race to Zero, Keeping Up the Momentum. We have had 2 exciting days of webinars looking at the topics of ESG as well as climate governance. If you have missed them, you can view the recording of the sessions on our YouTube at PMCC Malaysia. Today, we will have an interesting topic as well. Our theme for today will be accelerating transition into sustainable energy. And we have an esteemed lineup of speakers and panelists, which I believe will bring about a very robust and interesting discussion later on. But firstly, we are very honored to have with us today Datuk Fazlur Rahman Zainuddin, the Chief Strategy and Ventures Officer at Tenaga Nasional Berhad, to deliver a keynote speech on the future of net zero emission power industry. Datuk Fazlur leads the development and implementation of the long-term strategy of TNB, incorporating the energy transition, trends, and the environmental, social, and corporate governance agenda. His responsibility also includes searching for, identifying, and evaluating new business areas to venture into, exploring innovation and guiding TNB research, which is a subsidiary of TNB, to research fields relevant to TNB business. Let me now invite Datuk Fazlur to deliver his keynote speech. Over to you, Datuk.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for the very kind introduction. A very good afternoon to those of you dialing in from Malaysia and similar regions. And also very good morning to you for those of you calling in from the UK. I would like to thank the British High Commission as well as the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce for organizing this event. It is very important and also very timely. And also, I'd like to thank both of them for inviting Tenaga Nasional to this particular event to share our experience in the area of ESG and what we are doing with regards to climate change. Now, you would have recalled that in August, Tenaga announced its climate or sustainability pathway commitments 2050. So perhaps let me just put up the slides and take you through our commitments. Firstly, just a bit of introduction to Tenaga, and our purpose. Tenaga, or we started as the LLN, as the electricity body in Malaysia in 1949, and since then our purpose has been about brightening lives in the country, quite literally even, as we bring electricity to the very, very rural areas of the country. As we moved on this journey, we've seen that in addition to brightening lives, we've also created a better country. And I think this is very much the core DNA of Tenaga Nasional, bringing about a better world and brightening lives. This is at the heart of everything that we do since the beginning of our inception, whereby we power the nation. We have been active in contributing towards the social development in the country, socio-economic development in the country, and also whilst being a business, evolving and strengthening our business practices. Sustainability has been at the very center of Tenaga's core purpose and strategy. Next slide, please. So as you look at Tenaga in our role to the nation, being the electricity provider to the nation, we've always aspired to be the leading provider of sustainable energy solutions in Malaysia and internationally. We are committed to embed the sustainability agenda into our organization in order to seize opportunities in the rapidly transforming energy landscape, as you can imagine. But this is not something that has been only very recently. Yeah, TMB has started this journey since 2016 when we launched our Reimagining TMB strategy. Yeah, or we call RT, Reimagining TMB. Subsequent to that 2016 strategy, we undertook the first carbon footprint assessment in 2017, and we published our standalone sustainability report in 2017. All this was brought about because of the various disruptions that we saw facing our business going forward, particularly the decarbonisation, digitalization, decentralization of our businesses going forward. Now, today, we continue to strengthen our sustainability commitments. And as I mentioned earlier, in August, we announced our sustainability pathway. And this is guided together with the country's national sustainability agenda. And this agenda is a long-term journey, and our commitment is to a step towards decarbonization over the next 30 years. So as Tenaga, we believe that we can't do this alone. We support the whole of nation approach in addressing the nation's sustainability agenda. So talking about that, right? The nation's sustainability commitments have been already made clear. Yeah, Malaysia's commitments of becoming a carbon neutral nation as early as 2050, and in addition to that, reducing greenhouse gases emissions intensity by 45% by 2030. Yeah. Now, this is in support of the national climate actions. Yeah. There are two main focus as far as Tenaga is concerned: the Malaysian Climate Action Council, as well as the Peninsular Malaysia Generation Development Plan. Yeah. These are the two main guiding government references that we follow in developing our own commitments. Yeah. Just moving forward, next slide, please. So as we consider the plans that we take, that we commit to going forward, TMB has to take into consideration the ever-present energy trilemma, as you can see. For those not familiar, the energy trilemma is about balancing the various trade-offs between environmental sustainability, energy security, and energy equity or affordability. Excuse me. This is important, particularly for Malaysia as a developing country, in order to ensure things like energy security and affordability is at the forefront. Yeah, as the society continues to grow and from a low income to middle income to a higher income nation, access to energy and affordability is very important. So these are things that we consider quite clearly in our process of developing our commitments. Not only the balancing of energy trilemma, we also look at solutions on both the supply side as well as demand side. We often talk about the power sector from a supply perspective, right? So in providing electricity to the country, yeah, supplying the electricity. So on that score, we look at having a good balance of the generation baseload fuel mix in order to maintain a very reasonable tariff to the consumers. But on top of that, we start to look at a gradual transition to cleaner sources of energy, including RE. Yeah. But this transition is a journey, it's a gradual transition to avoid significant shocks to the system. On top of that, we know that in the power sector, bringing down emissions is a big challenge. Yeah. So in addition to bringing down emissions, they also need to look at offsets or carbon sequestration or utilization. These are areas that we look at from the supply side. On the demand side, however, we need to actually create that conversation with the customers. Not enough to talk about it from a supply, but we need to bring in the consumers on the demand side towards this conversation of climate action. On the demand side, we see the shifting customers' preferences towards green energy sources, and also the adoption of emerging technologies such as the electric vehicles, energy storage, rooftop solar, and energy efficiency solutions. All the while, the grid will be our major enabler in assuring the coupling of demand and supply side in the power sector. So what has our sustainability pathway been all about? So next slide, we'll talk about the sustainability pathway itself that we announced in August recently. This is a journey towards 2050. And this journey links our purpose and our roles whilst combining it with our business strategies and growth opportunities. There are three things that we talk about. Firstly, we aspire to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But that's a long range goal. So we need to have something a lot more closer. So by 2035, we commit to reduce our emissions intensity by 35%. By 2025, we target to increase our renewable energy generation capacity by 8.3 gigawatts. So this is the evolution of our commitment since 2016. So we have a mid-range or immediate goal in 2025, which is about 4 years down the road. Something middle range, interim range at 2035, and also by 2050. Yeah. What is also important to share here is that as we go towards our aspirations of 2050, we see a significant RE growth, but also importantly, a 50% reduction in our coal generation capacity by 2035. And this is towards a 2050 position of being coal-free. Yeah, so that's Tenaga's pathway with regards to our coal portfolio. So let's talk a little bit about RE, which is in the next slide. So renewable energy for Tenaga is the future. We have actually set certain targets with regards to expanding our renewable energy through the technologies of RE assets and also global expansion. As you can see in a diagram, we target 8.3 gigawatts by 2025, both from domestic and international sources. We believe that this is quite a challenging goal, quite a stretch goal, but we believe we are on the right track as we start to see the momentum picking up. As of 2021, our capacity of renewables is at 3.4 gigawatts at this stage. There are some details here that I'm sharing with you, which I would not go into, but suffice to summarize, for domestic, we've been participating in the large-scale solar auctions, building a large hydro at Negiri, and also on the customer side, implementing rooftop solar PVs. On the international side, we've been focused in two regions. One is the UK-Europe region, and the other one is Southeast Asia. In Europe, we've made great in UK and Europe, we've made great strides. Today, in terms of capacity, within the last 5 years, we've actually increased to about 500 megawatts by the end of this year. For Southeast Asia, we've started to taken some footholds into Singapore and Vietnam as our main focus areas. Aside from renewables, we know that new technologies is going to be an important enabler for the full transition by 2050. The next slide talks about how we leverage our new technologies in research and innovation to enable our sustainability pathway. So we look at our investment in research and innovation over 3 lenses or 3 horizons. One is actually to invest in our future business, leading from 2035 and beyond. 2 is investing from 2030, tomorrow's business, we call it tomorrow's business. And 3, investing in today's business, which is leading up to 2035. So these are the time horizons that we look at with regards to new technologies. So we have a game plan across the different time horizons. So we have the ingredients to develop technology with partners. We've implemented recently strong technology governance framework. We call it a technology management process. We've identified technology focus areas, which is endorsed by the group. We've also allocated some R&D funding to support the investment, and we've roped in subject matter experts within TNB and also partnering with external parties to achieve this. Yeah. So as we move forward, we are continuously looking for partnerships. We are open to collaboration with partners outside of Tenaga, be it in Malaysia or overseas, and in particular, maybe in the UK. So let me just wrap up in the next slide. I just want to leave you these 4 key messages. Firstly, the sustainability pathway for TNB is something which is in line with Tenaga's core purpose of making a better world and brighten our lives. In doing this, we've always taken the effort to work with our stakeholders and align with the government commitment towards climate action. We have taken our active steps to mitigate the climate change and pursue emerging green technologies and partnerships, while at all times looking at the balance of the energy trilemma. Our commitment on our sustainability pathway by 2050 is with an interim target. So we balance between what is clear and certain within a more shorter time frame with something with a bit more aspirational in a longer time frame. Now, it is going to be a challenging road ahead, and it is a journey, but we believe that there are also opportunities for us to grow our business as new technologies not only become technically feasible, but also economically viable as well. And finally, we can't do this all on our own. We believe in a whole of nation approach. We like to be able to partner and collaborate with various parties in order to achieve this national carbon neutral target by 2050. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and hand over back to the MC, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Datuk Fazlul, for such an insightful keynote speech and giving us a better understanding of what TNB's commitments are over the short term, medium term, and also long term, and also the initiatives that TNB is actually going to do in the next coming years to achieve that commitments. Just to build on what was highlighted by Datuk Fazlul earlier, we also have with us here today Datuk Beros Nikmal Mirdin, the Executive Chairman of Hip Muda Berhad, who will talk about the open access as the key enabler to decarbonized energy. A quick background on Datuk Beros. He's an electrical engineer by training and was involved in coordinating the movements of wholesale electricity in the United States from 1998 to 2006. And he has held several senior positions in the power and in energy industry as well, including as CEO of Telekosang Hydro, Managing Director of Perak Hydro Renewable Energy Corp, and also the Executive Director of Gunung Capital Berhad. With that, I would like to invite Datuk Beros to give his input into this topic.
Good afternoon, distinguished speakers, panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank the British High Commission and British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce for organizing this event as part of the race to net zero and in the run-up to COP26. Hip Muda is pleased to be part of the Climate Action Week. The race to net zero is here, and we aim to contribute positively towards this movement. In Malaysia, governments, corporations, foreign investors, and individuals all have a critical role to play in addressing the climate crisis. As an advocate for renewable energy, Hip Muda plays an even more important role in creating a sustainable future for all. Given the ever-growing demand for electricity, decarbonization of power and production of clean energy commands greater importance in the planet's organized climate action endeavors. For energy, the shift towards a net zero future is driven by convergence. to innovate and adapt to the technological developments and trends to thrive in the 21st century energy industry. In the race to net zero, the energy sector plays a paramount role in reducing carbon emissions. As the rapid rise of renewable energy begins to displace the traditional carbon-intensive power plants, many countries have begun to adopt policies to drive up with the renewable energy component of the overall energy mix. But this only marks the beginning of the transition. There is a vast potential to eliminate the inefficiencies prevalent across existing energy supply chain. But a sustainable and affordable energy transition is only possible given the right combinations of technologies and solutions. New innovative business models and technologies have forced the energy industry to reassess and evaluate how best to continue serving increasingly complex customers in the digital era. Disruptors have real potential to lead a clean energy transformation with greater focus placed on renewables, efficiency, and flexibility. However, greater efficiency is needed to truly deliver on the road to net zero. And for Malaysia, one key enabler is open access. In Malaysia, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources and the Energy Commission regulate the energy industry. Thus, open access will need to begin from the policy level. Open access is broadly aligned with liberalization of the electricity industry, with higher accessibility to the national electricity grid, a vital step in creating significant value. The energy industry in Malaysia has historically been rigid, with long-term PPAs and monopoly of the grid, providing an assured sense of stability at the expense of potential innovation. However, with the development of technologies and increased climate-conscious consumers, there has been no better time to change the existing business models to adapt to the growing trends. The developments in solar technology coupled with large-scale energy storage solutions have been a vigorous catalyst in the push towards distributed energy generation. Greater use of renewable energy resources will thus reduce the use of traditional fossil fuel power plants. Open access to the energy infrastructure can also enable energy independence for wider communities, as they can shift towards self-generation without needing any schemes or intervention from the government. Of course, the answer is never that simple. We understand technical limitations of the national grid, and batteries make it difficult to realize the distributed generation dream overnight. There will need to be a transitional period where the grid infrastructure will be upgraded as batteries develop a commercially viable model. The recent trends of technological development, as seen in the solar industry, show encouraging indications that batteries are not far behind. Collaboration between the public and private sector can help reduce the burden on the national utility companies to bear the entire cost of infrastructure upgrade, which will benefit both the operator and the consumer in the long term. Therefore, enabling open access and promoting third-party grid users will be essential in ensuring vital upgrades to the infrastructure will be performed. Open access, which also translates into greater transparency across the energy industry, greatly increases the efficiency of energy usage. As we enter into the digital age, where nearly every electrical power device is connected, its corresponding usage can also begin to be optimized. The onset of IoT in devices and cloud software enables us to store and process data at unprecedented rates, and technology can be leveraged to provide insight into increasing efficiency of energy usage. Greater transparency of electricity demand and supply throughout the day can inform commercial and industrial consumers to optimize electricity usage. Ensuring the bulk of operations is conducted during off-peak hours will reduce the peak demand burden on the generators, while also generating cost savings for the commercial and industrial consumers, creating a win-win scenario for all parties involved. as energy is generated and dispatched at increasing costs. Reducing the peak demand load will reduce the average cost of generation, as the more expensive and typically more carbon-intensive power producers are utilized less, which in turn reduces the cost of electricity. The benefits of open access are clear, and at IMUDA we have taken steps to get ahead in the race to net zero. One example would be the Telekosang Hydro project recently proposed for acquisition by IMUDA, which utilizes a run-of-river mini hydro scheme instead of typical dams. Run-of-river schemes require much less space than dams, thus reducing the amount of deforestation required, while also ensuring the impact on the aquatic ecosystem is mitigated. So the key question for us is, how can we as a key energy player move into the future without breaking what is working today? Malaysia can learn the lessons of many international benchmarks who have preceded us in providing open access, reaping the full benefits of the very possible future without the pains of hard-learned lessons. For IMUDA, the answer is in collective action, and we call on all stakeholders to do more to stop the climate crisis by embracing new business models and innovations to unlock sustainable growth. In closing, no one party will have all the right answers, but with action, we stand to reap the rewards of marrying the 21st century digitalized capabilities with the 20th century backbone of the industry. With inaction, we risk becoming obsolete in the race to net zero. Thank you once again to the organizers for having IMUDA as part of the Climate Action Week. I take this opportunity to once again reiterate our commitments to the race to net zero. I am pleased to inform all attendees that IMUDA has signed the BMCC Climate Action Pledge, and we look forward to collective discourse and concerted actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Datuk Barros, for that invaluable insights. Again, on renewable energy as well as technology, very in line with what Tenaga Nasional has shared earlier. And also the recommendations on how to drive sustainable energy as well as to increase efficiency in the industry supply chain in Malaysia. I'm sure Datuk Fazlo will have some things to add later on in the panel discussion. And again, we want to thank Datuk Barros and his team at IMUDA Berhad for supporting this event as our Malaysia Climate Action Week partner. Before we continue with our next speaker, I would like to play a corporate video from another of our Malaysia Climate Action Week partner, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, Icaew.
What will your job look like in 10 years' time? The world is rapidly changing, and so is the role of chartered accountants.
Sustainability is being integrated into mainstream business, and the accounting profession is at the heart of this. The accountants decide what information is collected, how decisions are made, and how the outcome of those decisions are being presented to the outside world.
Are you ready? To help you prepare, we'll introduce you to chartered accountants already at the forefront of social change and leading thinkers who believe chartered accountants are critical in solving some of the most urgent challenges in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our first theme, Trust, will explore the role that chartered accountants play in safeguarding data and information that is accurate and objective. Later this year, we'll look at diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and access to education, and consider how these themes will shape the profession for the next decade and beyond. How will you gain the right set of skills, knowledge, and experience to be the agents of change that the world needs? Visit icaew.com.
Next, I would like to introduce our next speaker and also the moderator for our panel discussion today, Mr. Richard Spencer, who is the Director of Sustainability at Icaew. Allow me to just briefly give a short introduction on Richard. He joined Icaew in 2005 in order to set up the sustainability practice within the technical strategy department. During this time, Richard has led on the Icaew Thought Leadership and Engagement Program in Sustainability. He was a co-convener at the Finance Innovation Lab, which was named by the Observer and Nesta as one of the top 50 of Britain's new radicals in 2012, and was shortlisted for the Buckminster Fuller Awards for Social Responsible Design. Before I pass the floor to Richard to introduce himself, as well as to spend the next few minutes to set the scene for the panel discussion, let me just give a couple of housekeeping rules. Please ask your questions during the session and send them to the Q&A box feature at the bottom of your screen. Please do not use the chat box, but instead, please use the Q&A feature. We will attempt to address your questions during the Q&A session if the time permits. May I now invite Richard Spencer, Director of Sustainability at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, to deliver his speech and proceed with the panel discussion on accelerating transition into sustainable energy. Over to you, Richard.
Daniel, thank you very much indeed. And thank you to everyone for inviting me here today. It's a real honour to be invited to the Malaysian Climate Action Week, and I feel very privileged. Yes, so I am the Director of Sustainability at Icaew, and we have been working on sustainability as an important area for the Chartered Accountants since 2005. And we've built a lot of the sustainability issues, in particular green finance and energy, into our qualification, the ACA. We built it into our continuing professional development materials for members. This year, we established a sustainability and climate change community, which is open to everyone, I should say. But between January and March this year, we secured over 9,000 members for that. So you can see that the profession, or as a measure of the profession engaging in this, I think that's a good example. And we also, although obviously as a professional body with a few buildings and not much more, we don't have a huge carbon footprint. We have made the commitment to become carbon neutral and have been there for a year now, and we have a roadmap to drive out the carbon particularly from our scope 3 emissions around our staff and volunteer travel. So we have a strong commitment to this, and it's wonderful to be here today to talk to you and to moderate this panel session. I suppose for my opening remarks, I just wanted to think about the climate crisis isn't just really an isolated crisis. It's part of a crisis of a massive loss of biodiversity and the huge social challenges of growing inequalities. And it was just wonderful to see Datuk Fazla talking about the trilemma and the importance of affordable, not just clean, but affordable energy and the security of that. And while I was preparing for this, I was looking at a report from the Environmental Division of the ASEAN Secretariat, and noted, and I think this is why this is particularly wonderful to be here today, is that in Southeast Asia is one of the most at-risk regions of the world, with 6 of the 20 ASEAN nations being so vulnerable to climate change. Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Vietnam, and the Philippines all have large populations, as you know, that live at coast level and are at huge risk from heat, water stress, storms, flooding, and landslides. And I think that's the important thing to think about when we are talking about a race to zero, because of course we are also talking about a race to resilience. The impacts of climate change, and driven, I would say, with a certain great degree of humility, driven by the global north and our consumption. The tragedy, one of the great tragic aspects of all of this, of course, is that so much of the impact is borne by those least able to withstand it. And so when we think about an energy transition, of course, we have to think about a just transition. We have to think about people. It's important. I always feel that, in particular, when it's easy, in a sense, it's easy to talk about a climate crisis, but of course, we need to think about the human aspects of that. And so, literacy, energy literacy, is so important. It's not just a business or a sector. It's an essential part of human development, and we must learn to understand it. And in doing so, we must measure it in the right ways. It shouldn't just be about how much carbon, although that is absolutely vitally important, but it's also about the impacts on human beings. And that governance piece, therefore, about not just being about financial health, but about the S in ESG for energy, and about a just transition, as well as thinking about the futurity of the issues. The need to think about our ability to be adaptable and resilient and agile when we're thinking about the energy of the future. What we're talking about, the pathway to 2050, in a way is a destination, but it's also a process, and we've got to think about how resilient will our systems be to future shocks. And whilst thinking about this, and I'm just going to share my screen, I was reading the World Energy Council World Energy Issues Monitor, because that's a fascinating snapshot. It's based on interviews with over 2,500 energy leaders across 108 countries. So a very comprehensive survey. And its key findings were, of course, that the biggest area. What this does is it maps. Let me call this up, and then you can see what I'm talking about. Hello. It identifies what is it that keeps energy leaders up at night, and what is it that keeps energy leaders busy at work. And this is the global finding, and what it's measuring is likely impact against uncertainty. So in the top right hand corner, where we have the kind of orangey bubbles, those are what are keeping energy leaders awake at night. And the blue ones, which have a greater impact but less uncertainty, are essentially what is keeping energy leaders busy at work. And I think one of the big themes that comes through here is about humanizing energy. It's about the economic uncertainty that we're facing is a big issue, and what we are seeing is an increasing focus on the social agenda, as particularly that point about affordability, about energy efficiency, about renewables. And then if we go to very quickly, because I'm conscious I stand between you and the panel, this is the picture for Asia, which again is similar, but you can see that there are issues around, in particular around energy supply, thinking about security risk, carbon abandonment. Each of us will, of course, have a different pathway to zero, and we've got to think about not just renewables, but this kind of the friends of carbon, and carbon abatement is going to be a huge one, as well as energy storage innovation. And you can see the things that are actionable again are thinking about how our societies are changing and how we meet those changing demands, energy efficiency, and the renewable energies. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And to keep the time, we have a wonderful panel lined up for you today. And what I'm going to do is to introduce each of the panelists very briefly, allow them to speak about who they are and their organisations. Now, I'm conscious that our first panelists were after an absolutely wonderful keynote address. So thank you for that very much, Dr. Fazlo Rahman. But can I introduce you first? And our panel session is around accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. And I wondered, Dr., if you had some opening remarks that you might like to add to that rather wonderful keynote speech you gave us.
Thank you very much, Richard. Firstly, I'd like to, reiterate my appreciation for both the British High Commission and the BMCC for inviting us here to share our thoughts here. Personally, I don't think I want to add anything, Richard. I think we've covered quite a bit about what Tenaga's focus is in this particular area. Yeah, but maybe perhaps I just want to say a few words with regards to some expectations of the discussion as we go around. Yeah. So to us, I think as we look at climate action, I think it's something which for Tenaga, it was something that took a while for us to actually come to a position on this, right? It is a journey, and my suggestion to other entities, organizations, or people in different entities as they start to think about climate action. What's important is actually to start working on it, to start thinking, putting some effort from a corporate standpoint in terms of its strategy, in terms of its allocation of investments, etc., in this particular area. We will not all be able to have all the answers. Yeah, and I think but what's important is actually having the first step. Yeah. So to me, I think as we have this panel discussion today, I'm like to also share in terms of what we are doing, but at the same time, I also want to learn from my other panel colleagues in terms of what their experiences are, and also to perhaps take some of those thoughts and feedback into some of the things that we are also considering in Tenaga National. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a good and productive conversation. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you very much, Dato. And that really is a fantastic point, is about actually getting started and not knowing. We don't necessarily have to start knowing all the answers. We can get on the way. So I do have a very quick question actually for that. It is, and excuse me if this is a bit cheeky, but you have clearly started out on this journey and have a fantastic vision. What do you think? What would you say has been the biggest thing you've learned so far?
Oh, okay. Well, the biggest thing that I've learned so far has been that it is absolutely important to engage your stakeholders along this journey. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Yeah, and you can imagine for Tenaga National, because as a power utility company in the country, yeah, we have many stakeholders. It is not just the customers whom we serve. It is not just the investors whom we actually pay dividends to. We also have regulators. We have government ministries, various government agencies. We have NGOs, we have our own supply chain, and of course our employees. Yeah, that has been one of the biggest learning, I think, for us in this journey over the past few years, is making sure that as we talk about certain topics on the energy transition, we always have to make sure that there is some form of alignment. No, you won't get 100% alignment. I think that's not you can't expect that, but I think you have to get the discussion going, so at least some form of alignment in terms of where we're all heading. And in what's also equally important is actually that there's continuous engagement, continuous updates, continuous interactions, and getting feedback. Yeah? It is also important that we don't actually I think push certain things a bit too hard in certain areas when certain other stakeholders have maybe different views. Yeah, so it's quite a delicate balance for us to do. Yeah, so that's the big thing, my big takeaway.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important insight, is that this is a journey that everyone's got to come along, and none of us can sit around expectantly hoping our parents are going to give us a present. We've got to get up there and be part of the process. That's a really fantastic insight. So next, I'd like to introduce Dato Shahril Nazri Ahmad, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Energy for in Puda. So Dato Sharif Nazri, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe talk a bit about your organisation and your insights for this first insights for this the idea of a sustainable energy transition? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Richard. My name is Icaew. I'm actually from Muda Berhad. One of the keynote speakers is actually my boss, Datuk Beros, and he spoke at length about what we aspire to be as far as Muda is concerned. Just a little bit of a background of Muda. It's actually a 46-year-old company, which is about slightly younger than me. And traditionally, we have been focusing in the construction industry. But then we have actually recently pivoted into renewable energy, as well as private healthcare. And it's actually backed by an injection of new talents into the company from the industries. Within the past 1 year, we have actually managed to attract more talents from within these two industries. And right now we are in the process of acquiring some quality renewable energy assets in the form of hydropower plants, small hydropower plants, which is a run-of-river scheme, and also a large-scale solar. And this we envisage will provide value to our investors and stakeholders at large. And I think with this move, it's actually has given the market some sort of a positivity. They have reacted positively to our transformation, at least for the last 1 year or so. In terms of our aspiration, just to echo again what Datuk Beros has actually articulated in his keynote address, is actually for us to be one of the leading sustainable energy companies by continuously investing in capacity building, in greenfield as well as brownfield renewable energy development projects in Malaysia as well as the Southeast Asia, and by also investing in technologies that can further support the deployment of the renewable energy into a stable, into a more consistent and reliable form of energy, such as the energy storage solution. I look forward to having a conversation with the panel members, and we hope to have a good conversation. Thank you.
That's terrific. Thank you. A very, very quick question for you. And this maybe is something more for our international audience here is what does Malaysia, how does Malaysia compare with other countries in this region in terms of renewables? Where are you on the journey compared to others in the region, and what do you think would be the big enablers around renewables?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think as far as Malaysia is concerned, when it comes to its position in Southeast Asia countries, when it comes to the renewable energy development and deployment, I think we are amongst the leaders in the Southeast Asia region. Of course, we were slightly late when it comes to the expansion into renewable energy market. I think it was started by Thailand, and they have actually made quite good strides in terms of its renewable energy deployment, especially in the solar side. But Malaysia then picked up, I think as early as 2012, when the government introduced the renewable energy plan, and subsequent to that, we've seen several introduction or of the large-scale solar bidding programs. Now we are already at our fourth, I think, in terms of the large-scale solar program, and the capacity on a year-to-year basis, as well as the pricing in terms of the tariff that the players have been bidding have actually, the capacity has increased and the tariff has gone down. And we believe that, you know, through this introduction of programs supported by the government with flexible government policies, as far as you know, in terms of tax allowances, tax credits are concerned, will actually further, you know, support the growth in the renewable energy sector. And I'd like to see, you know, some form of, you know, an expansion of support when it comes to the storage side, because with regards to renewable energy and the problem with the intermittency in terms of the energy generation, you know, we have to rely on the sun, and if it's hydro, we have to rely on the amount of water in the river. And when it comes to the bioenergy, it depends on the supply of the feedstock from the palm oil waste and whatnot. So the consistency in terms of supply will need to be somewhat backed by a storage solution. And at the moment, you know, I think in this part of the world, the cost of the implementation of RE plus storage is still on the high side. And it's not something which, without a proper policy, is something which private industry will not basically go in and invest yet. But we are hopeful because we've seen that, you know, with the government support in the solar industry, we've seen the price or the tariff that is coming from the solar plants have actually reduced quite considerably ever since the program was initiated back in 2012.
That's really fascinating, and I imagine that as we are in the UK, tangling with the issue around hydrogen, I guess that it sometimes I think in the UK with the kind of hydrogens, there's this sort of thing of, well, we'll sort out green hydrogen and we'll get, you know, and yet there's this huge gap between this idea of green hydrogen and where we are now. Is it a similar issue here?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, with green hydrogen, you know, the source of energy that is required to produce the hydrogen has to be coming from renewable energy, and you need a big source of water, because you need to basically go through the process of electrolysis and whatnot. And I guess with the blue hydrogen, or even the gray hydrogen, which is what people are really looking at right now. The pricing of green hydrogen, even though it has some premium to it, but I guess, you know, when it goes to the market, ultimately people will consider the cheaper option.
Yeah. That's really insightful. Thank you so much. And I want to move on to our next panelist, and please, Sharifa, forgive me if I get your name completely wrong, but Sharifa Zaida Nalisha Said Ibrahim, who is the president of the Malaysian Oil Gas Services Council. Welcome, Sharifa. Would you like to introduce your organization and give us your opening thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a setback here because I prepared a whole long of slides for me to share, but after the distinguished two speakers just speaking off the cuff, maybe what I should do is just speak off the cuff rather than go through the slides.
Well, Sharifa, whatever you feel comfortable with, you know. Okay. I think a mixture is always lovely. So if you feel more comfortable with slides, please just share your screen and do that.
I'm not too sure whether BMCC is actually holding the slides for me, or apologize for that. I had some problems.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go through the slides very quickly, not to bore everybody, but I would like to talk a little bit on MOXI. MOXIE, if you can go to the next slide, please. MOXIE was formed. MOXIE stands for Malaysian Oil and Gas Services Council, representing the OGSE industry, oil and gas services equipment. Was formed in 2003 as a national level independent industry association, promoted and driven by the services sector of the Malaysian oil and gas industry. So MOXIE has over 500 member companies representing all sectors within the industry. We have an estimated of 60,000 workforce. And our aim is to promote the capabilities of our members to our stakeholders. And we actually have over 400 activities per year in a 365-day year. So we are very, very active in addressing the issues and the pains of the industry. Can we have the next slide, please? I think I've mentioned this. Let's go to the next slide. So MOXIE EXCOs are elected every 2 years. It's an NGO, so we are not paid. We do have our day jobs. We do have to struggle with the challenges of managing our own companies. But the EXCO committees are elected every 2 years. And we try to ensure that the elected EXCOs and the trustees and advisors represent each sector of our OGSE, because many people do not understand what OGSE is. We actually represent the whole supply chain from upstream to downstream and everything in between. And I'll show that in the next slide, please. We have about 507 members in October, but if you can see this, the picture at the bottom, we have members from upstream, downstream, midstream, and transportation. And OGSE, the whole supply chain, also falls under different ministries in the government. So there is this OGSE services equipment companies that do not fall under any ministries and is actually on its own. So this is the supply chain that supports the stakeholders like Petronas and Exxon and Shell for the oil and gas sector. Can we have the next slide, please? I'll skip this. Then we go to the next one. So how do we have 400 activities in a year? So we function through MOXIE working groups. We have, as you can see, alternative energy, asset integrity, competency, decommissioning. We have everything that is of value add to the industry, addressing the issues and the pains of the industry. And as you can see, there are new working groups that we've initiated, alternative energy downstream, because in oil and gas, downstream is the active sector now. And we have sustainability development working group, and of course, hookup and commissioning and startup. So all these working groups is run by very passionate members who are specialized in this particular sector. And it's we engage with the stakeholders to understand the needs and to try to support it. Next slide, please. Representing the industry, we were part of the industry services sector blueprint, national OGSE blueprint, MBOD as a technical expert panel, and HRD COP sectoral training committee. And the next slide, please. We also collaborate with our other associations to ensure that there's no duplication of resources and time, because the purpose is just to ensure that the OGSE industry is well represented and try to address all the issues within that. Can I skip to the 2 slides after this? Next slide. Okay. So the previous one, please. So understanding the importance of sustainable development that's happening at the moment, we have established the Sustainable Development Working Group to address the UN SDG amongst the OGSE players in Malaysia. And the intention is to promote the SDG 17 SDG in 2030 agenda for the oil and gas industry in Malaysia. So we have the mission, objectives, and if you go to the next slide, the working group have, next slide please, have established a working group model where you can see promotion, integration, collaboration is key to address the social development, quality of education, best practices, conservation, innovation policy in order to meet the agenda for the sustainable development. Next slide, please. And the key success criteria, I think everybody's aware of this. Partnerships and networks, resources, availability, funds, technology, manpower, commitment, strong support from all stakeholders, knowledge and information sharing, and of course the drive and passion of MOXIE members. Sustainability without passion, I think will not be translated properly. you need to have the passion to believe in sustainability in order to drive the agenda. Next slide, please. And because the importance of this, sorry, let me just go through. So we have actually mapped our activities to 9 of the SDG out of the 17. If you look at SDG 1 of no poverty, we promote local development in our industry. SDG 3, good health and well-being, we promote health and safety of the workforce through our MOXIE Act Safe and Stay Safe. These are all initiatives with the MOXIE that we've mapped. It's not that we mapped against SDG, it's already inherent in our activities, but so happen can be mapped against the SDG. SDG 4, quality of education, a number of initiatives as we are part of industry-led body, HRD Corp, technical expert panel for MBOT, for TVET, established training portal for MOXIE OG Learn, HR Roundtable, and we also mapped SDG 5 because we have a working group called MOXIE OG Women in Energy to look at the gender diversity. SDG 7, affordability and clean energy through MOXIE Alternative Energy Working Group. SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. A lot of activities are done through this innovation working group, like OGSE Innovation Awards, and addressing and engaging with the stakeholders to understand what are the technologies that's required for the stakeholders. For SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, where we support the supply chain sustainability, local capabilities and supply. SDG 14, life below water, through our health and safety working group, focusing on accident prevention and responses. SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institution. As an industry association, it is important for us to engage with our members and community, and of course, advocating the anti-corruption. The next slide is my last slide. I'd like to just go through this definition because I think eventually I'll come back to this when we have that discussion later. Sustainability as defined by the National OGSE Industry Blueprint 2022-2030 by Icaew is defined as maintaining the sector's social license to operate. Achieving this involves formulating regulation in adherence to global standards on labor, funding and procurement practices, and adapting strategies to promote sustainable business operations in line with evolving environmental standards and promoting robust corporate governance and social responsibility towards OGSE. And the next one is the definition per Wikipedia. And I quite like this definition. The use of energy is considered sustainable if it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I'd just like to leave it at that, and then I'll probably refer to it later when we have that discussion. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was, wow. that was wonderful, but and there is so much there. It's great to see that such positive engagement with, you know, I mean, the oil and gas sector is so easily demonized in a lot of narratives, and quite often in the world of sustainability you see a sort of narrative of saints and sinners, of good and bad, you know, and if you're not one, you're the other. Whereas the key thing is the transition, isn't it? And so just a quick question for you is, this is an enormous challenge for the oil and gas sector. What's your sense of how your members are adapting to this global shift and into the world of new energy?
I can't promise a short answer to that.
That's okay.
Okay, transitioning to a low or zero carbon future. You must remember the OGSE sector is for contractors. So whatever the direction is, contractors will do. You know, you want something, we will provide the technology. You want to go this way, we try to find the pathway to go there. But my question would be, do we really understand the transition into the new energy in terms of the components of shifting to the zero carbon future? That would be my question to, it's easy for us to talk about changing, but we're talking about a transition, and a transition means a process. It requires time and it must be embraced by all parties. Now, who are these parties? The stakeholders, the industry. And I think the most important thing is public in Malaysia. So going to my definition in Wikipedia just now, the use of energy is considered sustainable if it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So let's not confuse us, Malaysia, with other countries. What is Malaysia energy transition steps? What are our alternative energy source fulfilling the needs of the energy trilemma, reliability, affordability, and security, as mentioned before? We know where we want to go, but what is the journey and how long is this journey? So one needs to look at what Malaysia has, what is the current need against where we are going into the future. If we jump when the infrastructure is not there, are we willing to have the energy disruption like the water disruption that we are constantly having in Selangor, in Malaysia now? Can we face what Houston and other countries have faced due to power shortages? So it's very important for us to understand what is the transition. Future generations, we know, want to have cleaner energy. We want to save the world. So the transition is a process, a journey must be custom made for Malaysia. Now, policies and infrastructure need to support this. Now we have the Naga National here. So I was going to say power and oil and gas has always been moving in parallel. Now, to me, it's my personal opinion, eventually this is converged. This will be converging. Now, 50 years, okay, what we are saying now, that energy, the transition energy will be gas. I think this is what we're saying, just because of the energy trilemma. 50 years is a long time. So how do we support the ecosystem? What is the ecosystem that we need to support in order to ensure that we are transitioning properly? So one, if gas is the energy transition, I mean, if we agree that gas is the energy transition while we're trying to find these alternative sources that is available to Malaysia and make it feasible, then where does gas come from? So it is fossil fuel. So I was watching a movie on TV, staying in a hotel recently in KL, and happily watching this movie, and a Greenpeace advert comes on and condemning fossil fuel for causing the Arctic bear to lose their home due to oil spill. So how will the public respond to this? So the awareness that, you know, we need to have certain phases, and this needs to be translated and disseminated very clearly to the public, not just the stakeholders and industry, but also the public, so that we can move into this transition properly, because we have to eliminate the challenges. To me, it's an unnecessary challenges, because we can do something about it by raising the awareness and by carrying the public with us. We want to go here, but there is phases that we go through. So we'll have this phase of gas transition, but we need to actually go to the next one. Whilst we're going there, we need to have this ecosystem that supports the development of alternative sources that is available in Malaysia. So this process must be clearly understood and supported by all. And if we are talking about gas as a transition energy, so what is the ecosystem? For OGSC, that's us. So the inherent ecosystems needs to be available, the inherent capabilities, the inherent skill sets, whilst we develop the other skill sets. Whilst the industry is aware that the issue of survivability is the thing is the OGSC ecosystem is struggling at the moment, as you all know. We need to survive this, because what it means, if we are not surviving this, then you have to build a whole ecosystem. Now we are talking about OGSE being where we are after 47 years. And we are talking about maybe the next 50 years, more or less, maximum, for the energy transition, for the energy to be to be delivered. So 47, 50 years, why do we actually want to build a whole new ecosystem? No. So are we aware of this transition? Yes, we are aware. But as far as contractor is concerned, where is the business? The business is the same, except that it's gas and it's going to go into a low carbon future. So how do we do this? We support by trying to find what are the technologies, the low carbon, the CSS, all the technology that will support for us to achieve this net zero carbon in 2050. So I told you it's not going to be a short answer. So.
No, but what an insightful answer, and in particular, I think so important to bring out that every country will have its own pathway.
Yes.
And that's so important. And the other thing that just shone out for me there is the need for energy literacy and understanding. So thank you so much, Sharifa. And I just want to move now on to our fourth speaker, who is Luke Joseph, the head of country for BP Malaysia. And Luke, I wondered if you, fourth of our panelists, but by no means the least of our panelists, where if you wanted to share some of your, introduce BP Malaysia and share some of your initial thoughts with us, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this forum on behalf of BP. I'm not going to take too much time because I'm just conscious that we have a clock that's ticking. But I guess what I'll say is, BP was one of the first oil majors, if you recall, to announce the very bold ambition to go net zero by 2050. Very bold ambition, and on the back of that ambition that was announced, we've undergone recently our largest restructuring in history. So we've got a 100-over-year history. We've undergone the largest restructuring on our end, and the intent here is to move from an international oil company to an integrated energy company. Right now, our sustainability framework is focusing on 3 areas in particular. Right, so the first one obviously is getting to net zero. Second one is actually improving people's lives, and the third one is caring for the planet, right? So I think, just to the points which Sharifa was just highlighting earlier, the dilemma we're in, the trilemma that we're in, the way BP look at it is we are a transitioning company, or we are what we call a greening company, right? So we still have major operations assets in hydrocarbons, but we are, looking to ramp that down by 40% by 2030, right? And as we ramp down our hydrocarbon portfolio, we're looking to ramp up our renewables portfolio within that span as well. So very bold ambitions, and we are already starting to action on some of these things, and probably can get into a little bit on that during the forums. But I'll sort of stop here and hand it back to you, at least for now, Richard.
Thank you, and that's a very illuminating, and it's kind of it's the big challenge, isn't it? Is how do you move from being an oil and gas company to being an energy company? Just to build on that is just to think about what steps have you made in Asia and in Malaysia particularly to reach that very ambitious goal that BP has of being a net zero company by 2050, I guess really for me also is in your supply chain. What is it your clients need to be looking out for?
Okay, I guess I'll probably look at this or break this up into two parts, right? So the first one, obviously, is what are we doing in Asia, in Malaysia, and then the second part to that is what should our clients pay attention to? But I'll start off first with the second part of the question, right? So what should our clients pay attention to? So 3 things, 3 pillars that our strategy is built on, right? So first of all, it's resilient and focused hydrocarbons, so advantaged oil, right? Because we are looking to, as I mentioned earlier, gradually ramp down our hydrocarbon portfolio. So we do still have projects coming online this year, but this is what we refer to as resilient focused hydrocarbons, because the returns or the yield on these projects versus the investment is particularly high, right? So that's one, resilient focused hydrocarbons. The second one is convenience and mobility. Okay, and I'll touch a little bit on that as well. And then the third one being low carbon energy, right? As I was saying, hydrocarbons will be a core part of our strategy for decades to come, right? So we're not saying that we're going to be moving out of hydrocarbons completely, right? Because it's not something that happens overnight, right? So as I was saying earlier, we are greening, we are transitioning, but we are going to be looking at focusing on hydrocarbons or oil and gas that is cheaper to produce, right? And post 2025, we will be looking to ramp down that hydrocarbons portfolio, ramp up our renewables accordingly. Now, on the convenience and mobility side of it, right, we sell fuels and convenience retail to over 10 million customers globally, right? And we want to double this as part of our business over the next decade by expanding to new markets such as India. We've already got quite an established EV charging business in the UK. And we are looking now to expand that to countries like Germany as well as China, right? So for example, in China, we are now partnering with Didi. Didi is sort of the Grab or Uber equivalent in China. And we are partnering with them to build out their electric vehicle charging network, right? So Didi is the world's largest mobility provider. They offer about 30 million rides per day, and we have 600 million users. So together we have already built 1,500 charge points, and we are adding more every week in this area, right? So, and then when it comes to low carbon energy, right, we want to grow our renewables business. A very significant part of our strategy, as I mentioned, as hydrocarbons ramp down, renewables is going to be ramping up, right? So our low carbon energy pipeline is current, in 2019 was standing at 4 gigawatts, and we are now at 21 gigawatts today, with an ambition of growing to 50 gigawatts by 2030, right? So as an example of our low carbon energy project would be the partnership that we have struck with Equinor on offshore wind assets, and this is in the east coast of the United States. But to the question, what's happening in Asia, what's happening in Malaysia? Now, as far as Asia is concerned, we are working with, or rather, we hold a 50% interest in Lightsource BP, which is a LSS provider, right? And we are now in the planning stage to expand our Wellington North solar farm in New South Wales, Australia, from 200 to 600 megawatts. In addition to that, we've also got some work being done with the Indonesian government to complete a feasibility study to develop carbon capture utilization storage facility in Tangguh, right? So this, together with projects, hydrogen projects that are being planned in Australia, I think there's lots happening in Asia. Malaysia, in particular, there's nothing happening at this point in time, but I guess this is the message out there. We are open to partnerships. We are looking at opportunities, to explore what's the art of the possible in Malaysia, because there's lots happening in the region right now, and I think that with the recent focus, especially on the back of the 12th Major Plan announcement, I think there's so much opportunities that can be tapped into in Malaysia. So hope that answers your question, Richard. I know it's sort of a long-winded answer, but hope that addresses it.
No, that was not long-winded. That was very comprehensive and great. So I just want to encourage people to put your questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to take a couple of questions from there. It's wonderful to see the audience engaged. So Cheryl, I'm going to come to you first. There's a question here about renewables, and I think we could probably expand this. The question actually is, what do you think about solar energy as the solution to achieve carbon neutrality in a company or a city? But maybe you kind of want to expand and just give us a bit of a view of what the renewables landscape looks like and how you see it evolving.
Okay.
Not a big question then.
Okay, in terms of the renewable energy landscape, especially in Malaysia, and for that matter, I guess throughout the world, the easiest in terms of the implementation or development would be in solar and also wind power, but not in Malaysia, in maybe in other parts of the world. Since the availability of sun is everywhere, so as long as you have a place to install your solar panels, you can actually generate electricity. So it's a good form of decentralization of energy generation. You can actually generate electricity closer to where the consumption is, and thereby, increasing the efficiency of the energy utilization. You don't have to rely on long transmission line and therefore with the losses in terms of efficiency throughout the network. So to me, if we want to basically expand rapidly in terms of the renewable energy development in Malaysia, it's solar because it's easy, it's fast. But of course, I think I've mentioned this earlier, and Datuk Beros in his keynote address also mentioned this. With solar, it comes with the problem of intermittency. So you've got cloud cover, and you may not be able to basically generate as much, and therefore you have to still rely on a third party, on an external power source from the grid. But with the reduction in the pricing of solar panels and solar system, if we are implementing it, closer to where we are using it, and it's for self-consumption purposes, it can certainly reduce the cost of utilizing the electricity. But if you want to have more consistency in terms of your supply, and not having to rely on the power from the grid, then an energy storage solution has to be implemented. And that's where the complication would basically set in to sort of balance the supply and the demand of power. I mean, typically, in office space, you'd probably utilize a lot more electricity during high noon because especially in Malaysia, because it's hot and you need air condition to be set at a full blast. And solar is also highly intense during that part of the day. But there would be certain industries where the consumption of electricity is higher during the early parts of the day, and also in the later parts of the day. So if you want to match with the solar power, it's not going to be possible. And you may need a lot bigger space in order to basically produce power by solar and store it in your energy storage for utilization in those two segment of time. Yeah, so it's going to be a bit complicated to manage, and we believe that by having a hybrid of a solution, solar with some small hydro and energy storage, maybe that could be a better solution, more sustainable solution for us to encourage or have renewable energy as a mainstream source of power in the future.
And I noticed in the World Energy Council report that one of the things that's keeping energy leaders in this region awake at night is one of the big issues is energy storage.
Sure.
And I suppose the flip side, just Sharif, I just want to pick your brain here a bit, because the flip side, of course, to renewables is as you're pointing out, is we have to use the friends of carbon, as it were, in the transition, and that means carbon abatement. Where's your sense of where that is in Southeast Asia at the moment? How far are we away from getting something that looks economic there? Oh, I think you need to come off mute there. Sorry, I do that all the time. And at least once a day.
Okay. The thing is, I think in other parts of the world, low carbon economy, low carbon environment is already available and is practiced already because of the sustainable or the global sustainability challenges that has been imposed on them. So it's just a matter of bringing in those technology. And at the moment, I think with our stakeholders, they are reaching out to the industry, looking for what kind of technology that they can use to achieve this objective. So I don't think there is an issue with the industry, with OGSE addressing these technologies that's required to achieve this low carbon economy. But the thing is just to find out where they are. And I don't know whether you know, OGSE has always been a conservative environment where new technologies are always looked, you always have to have 2+1 in place and things like that. But, with this new environment that we have, so it's now changing. We are transitioning also. We're actually open to new technologies. Even Petronas themselves are actually implementing, for example, wind platforms currently as a pilot somewhere in East Malaysia. So they are actually open to ideas because of this challenge towards net carbon zero in 2050. So as far as the industry is concerned, we are here, but our arms are everywhere in the world. So we can always access our friends from the MCC, from UK, from Norway, from Russia, to actually find where these technologies, of course, not forgetting China, obviously, to actually find where this technology can actually help to bring in. It's just a matter of understanding where they are. And of course, being transparent in sharing with the industry what are the objectives that each of the stakeholder wants would really help by being open. So I think, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's terrific. So I just want to come back to you now, Dato' Fazla. We've got a question around COP26. Surprise, surprise. And of course, the third goal of COP26 is around mobilizing finance. And there's been, that's going to be key, isn't it, in unlocking the success of COP is getting the OECD nations to commit and to develop a proper pathway for the 100 billion of investment that was envisaged in 2009 and then reconfirmed in 2015 at the Paris Accord. Well, I suppose I've got lots of questions there, but the question that we have from the audience is, in your opinion, how do we distribute that money amongst countries, and are there specific areas of focus that we should be thinking about in order to accelerate the transition? So I guess it's if we get to this pot of money, and I do think that's going to be key. Where are we going to get the biggest return, and not just financial return, but the sort of biggest carbon return, as it were?
Thank you, Richard, for that question. How do you distribute that money? A big question. Now, I think the answer is probably above my pay grade, but if you kind of like try to think about what's needed, I think we talk about the balance of each country is actually doing their part to actually address the climate action. Yeah, and you have this gulf between developing nations and developed nations. You also have this gulf between countries that actually have a big contribution to the emissions situation versus countries that have a small contribution to the emissions situation. So, I mean, there are many factors that need to be taken into consideration in terms of where that money, that capital needs to go into. Yeah, I think for countries that are developing, I think certainly, in my view, this is my view, yeah, accelerating the process of technology adoption, bringing the technologies, new technologies to becoming affordable within the market is very key. Yeah. So for me, let's take some examples that we've seen, right? over the past few years in Malaysia, we've seen solar PV levelized cost of electricity come down quite dramatically. Yeah. Now that pace of coming down is actually slightly behind what we've seen in developed countries. We also see similar trends with regards to things like energy storage, batteries, right? So battery storage, we've seen in developed countries, the pace of the technology becoming viable in the market a lot sooner compared to in Malaysia. The same thing with electric vehicles. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say here is that we see in some markets, particularly developing markets, the pace of the new green technologies a little bit further down the road. Yeah. Now we believe that in order to accelerate the pace of the efforts on combating climate change, etc., these technologies have to come into the economic viability kind of region or space within the developing countries. So I believe that in terms of the mobilization of funds, I would say that there will need to be some significant shift from the developed countries into the developing markets, into spaces such as new green technologies, such as, well, of course, the immediate ones, things like battery storage, etc. Yeah, to help the grid becomes more resilient for the price that we're actually imposing to the customers. Things like, for example, hydrogen technology. Yeah, accelerating hydrogen technology into the particular markets, because today hydrogen is actually still very much out of the range. I think it's $2 to $3 per kg, and I think the target is actually $1 to $2 per kg. So there's quite a lot of technology development that has to progress in hydrogen before it becomes affordable in this market. Yeah, and I think with scale, with funding, with investments into these particular spaces, we believe that they will accelerate the process, because we've seen that trend happen with the acceleration of solar PV costs. We've seen that trend happening with some of the battery storage costs. Yeah, and also we're seeing that trend happening with EV storage, EV electric vehicle costs as well. So we believe that that's an area that how I would say where the money would go into. How much each country gets, okay, that's not. I'll leave it to the policymakers to actually decide on that.
Well, brilliant answer. Luke, there's a question here. Actually, I'll directly with you. EV vehicles. So are we going to charge them from the grid, or are we going to use renewable energy sources? Because, and it's a good point that how we measure the green. What's your, because I suppose just thinking about this, one of the things that we've seen in the UK is that we kind of decarbonised our electricity grid first, and a lot of that wasn't necessarily, it was more because coal has still become an economic than a kind of green play. But the advantage of that, and there's been quite a lot of work done in universities around the modelling, that it's not just it's the order in which you decarbonise is quite important. So if you kind of electrify all your vehicles before you decarbonise the grid, you can actually get some pretty strange outcomes, whereas you decarbonise the grid first and then the electric vehicles. What's your thinking about that, and particularly answering this question? How do we get it done in, is there a right order?
So if I were to refer to the question in itself, I'm just pulling up the question, right? I think it's a good question. I mean, the EV vehicles will be charged using electricity from the grid or our resources, because if it's from the grid, it's not green, right? So the answer to that is it all depends on the infrastructure that's available, right? So if you look at where we position our EV charging, it's normally at petrol stations. We partner with petrol stations and so on. And depending on the local infrastructure, I would say it's mostly from the grid, but there are instances, there are certain locations where it's true end-to-end renewable energy, right from the offset to the outputs. But to answer that question in particular, it's mostly from the grid, and it's a good point because it's almost like what you're saying, Richard. It's a cart before the horse sort of situation, right? In terms of the order, I think the thought process there is, we're going to have to digest. Think of it as an elephant, and we're going to have to digest this in pieces. I like this analogy, right? And one of those pieces is the fact that there are emissions from vehicles, right? And if we were to electrify vehicles, that's one part of it that's sort of addressed. Now, going back to the point made that, well, you're still charging those vehicles from the grid, but hopefully someday, when we're able to develop the infrastructure accordingly, that would be an end-to-end solution.
Yeah, and I think the question brings out, doesn't it, the need at policy level to have a really clear plan about how we're going to do this. You can't let this happen in a piecemeal way. It's that kind of thing about where markets meet policy and how the two have to work together rather than separately, I think. Go please.
No, I was just about to say, it's EV adoption is driven by policy. I mean, you can look at the very aggressive stance being taken in some of the Western nations, in the US, in the UK. Post 2030, there's not going to be any longer combustion engines, right? So I think a lot of the outputs will be driven by the necessity to comply with policy.
And trying to avoid the unintended outcomes, of course, because once we've removed petrol and diesel engine cars, we lose 5% of the national tax revenue, because of course you don't get any duty on that. So how are you going to replace that? And of course that's one of the big debates at the moment in the UK. So we've got a question here about referring to Datuk Beryl's point around access for electricity. And the Malaysian gas market is now open to third-party access. Would it make sense for the same for the electricity market in order to ensure a supply-demand balance? And I'm not sure who to go to for that, but I'm looking at you, Sharifa.
I think it's for Datuk. Yeah, I think it's for Datuk Fazlur, not for me.
Datuk Fazlur.
Because my guess
has questions. I'm aching to answer questions, Richard. Could you refresh me the question on the?
So it's really asking is. Would it make sense to have third-party access to the electricity market in order to ensure a supply-demand energy balance?
I think, I mean, in terms of the subject of third-party access to the grid, has been something that we have explored and discussed with the regulator, the policymakers for a couple of years now. I think as is normal with many markets, there's evolution. The markets go through a regulatory evolution. From a single provider to generally into a more open kind of market environment. So I think this is actually part of a normal process that we see in many different markets. What would be very, very important though is actually as we consider what is right for Malaysia. Because different markets have different starting points. I think that's very important for all of us to understand. Different markets, different starting points. The income levels are different in terms of society, etc. And these are some things that we've actually previously discussed with the regulator on the MESI 2.0 in terms of the third-party access to the grid. What's important here is that as we do this market restructure, if you like, it is important to ensure that, again, that energy trilemma actually is being addressed. It doesn't come at a cost that's more to the consumers, or doesn't come at a cost of security issues. So this is important considerations. Now, the other thing that also need to be taken into consideration as we start to look at the market access topic is the subject of where tariffs are today in the country. I think what's important here is that Malaysia, I think we have been quite blessed. We've been quite fortunate over the past few years. Malaysia's electricity tariff to the residential customers is the lowest, is among the lowest, if not the lowest, in the ASEAN region. Yeah, and at the position of performance in terms of reliability that's comparable to UK, France, Australia. Yeah, so that's something that's actually very, very fortunate that we've seen in Malaysia, and I think part of that is actually because of the way the tariffs are structured. Yeah, opening up markets means that some of these tariff structures will change. Yeah. Today, if you look at the tariff structure for residential customers, for those consuming less than 300 kilowatt hours a month, yeah, the tariff has not changed since 2008, I believe it is. Yeah. For those consuming less than 200 kilowatt hours a month, the tariff has not changed since 1997. Yeah. So almost 20, well, basically 20 years plus, right? For those particular customers. And these are the lower income, the B40 members of society. So this is something that, what I'm saying here is that it's not an easy problem to address. We have been discussing, and I think certainly one of the things that we need to actually look at is actually tariff reforms, targeted subsidies. Yeah, that's very important to ensure that the most vulnerable members of society are actually having some assistance. Yeah, because as the market liberalizes, then tariff movements will be actually going up to market level. So especially today, if you start to look at where the coal prices, the gas prices are today, it is very, very high. Yeah, and if tariff moves in that particular manner, then that market pricing will have an impact to the consumers directly. Yeah, so these are things. It is it's important balance to consider. I think that's opening. So just in short, I think opening up market, I think, is a gradual process of any industry, and also the same for the power sector. But it has to take into consideration Malaysia's starting point and also addressing some of those issues, socio-economic issues of the trilemma, the B40, and so on and so forth. So that's an important point.
Okay, that's wonderful. So we're almost at time. Daniel, am I allowed quickly to ask each of our wonderful panelists a very quick question to conclude with? Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. So very, very quickly, guys, you've got about 30 seconds each. I'd love to finish with what do you think realistically? So we all want COP to end with nations in violent agreement that we're going to achieve 1.5 degrees by 2050. That's I know that's what we all want. That's what we're all hoping for. But what do you think we could come away where we'd say that was a good COP? So I'm going to go around the screen on my screen. Luke, what would be a good COP for you?
You're sort of putting me on the spot here, Richard.
Yeah, I know. No, forgive me.
No, that's fine. I think for me, being a Malaysian, I think seeing Malaysia actually step up our participation would be a good COP, because I can look at it from a corporate perspective, and BP is a very strong advocate of COP and has been all this while. But I think personally for me, I think seeing Malaysia, with the recent announcements on the 12th Malaysia plan and the very aggressive targets, I think more active participation, which would result in more opportunities for Malaysia in terms of policy changes and so on.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dr. Sharil, what for you would be a good COP?
We're trying to resolve a complex issue here.
I know.
Yeah. So to me,
the one thing you would go, thank goodness that happened.
Well, I guess all parties need to work together. A collective action that needs to be undertaken by the government with its policies, with its flexible policies to encourage decarbonisation. Corporate citizens with more private investment in new green technologies, and also people at large by changing their attitude in the quantity of energy that they demand. So it needs to be all parties working together to actually achieve this. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all in it together. Sharifa.
Unmute. Now say. Sustainability is something I think Malaysians cannot avoid, as this is a requirement imposed by our future generation and also by the climate. But to me, Malaysia can choose how to move in a manner that makes sense to us. Practical, rational, taking into consideration all facts in hand, what we have, how we pace our way into the energy transition, and bring the public with us, because it's so important to actually have this awareness from the public. If not, you have unnecessary disruptions. We know our country better. It's not that we do not want to embrace and move forward, but until that alternative energy can satisfy the current need for security, reliability, and affordability, let us ensure that Malaysia energy requirement is not disrupted.
Okay. And Datuk Fazla, I'm going to give you the last word.
Thank you, Richard. I'll maybe give you one flippant answer and one serious answer. I think that flippantly, I think that's what would be a good COP is actually less talk, more do.
I don't think that's flippant.
That's a flippant answer. But the more serious one, I think what will be a good COP is I think greater level of alignment and collaboration across all countries. Greater level of investments into or commitment to invest into new green technologies to accelerate the process. And three, I hope that COP26 actually raises a greater level of awareness in the public sphere, because I think certainly the public discourse is absolutely necessary. I think as we look at it in countries like Malaysia, for example, I think the discourse on climate issues probably need to take another step up. Yeah. So I think having greater, I guess, awareness, visibility, and it strikes the nerves of the people. I think that's very key. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So that just leads me to thank our hosts and organisers, the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur and the Malaysian British Chamber of Commerce, to thank our amazing panelists. Thank you guys for such a wonderful, wonderful, insightful panel. And of course, to thank you, the audience, for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard, and our lineup of panelists. That brings us to the end of our webinar for day 3 of the Malaysia Climate Action Week. And we would like to encourage you to help complete the feedback form on the chat box, so that we could see which areas we could improve on to bring you better and more valuable webinars in the future. And I would also like to highlight our day 4 event tomorrow on creating climate smart cities towards net zero ambitions. And we have distinguished speakers from IRDA, Dato' Ismail Ibrahim, Chief Executive of Iskandar Region Development Authority, AR Serena Hijaz, Vice President of Malaysia Green Building Council, Mahathir Aziz, Chief Executive Officer of MDEC, and Dr. Ross, Project Director of Mott MacDonald Malaysia. And we will also have the launch of the PMCC Climate Action Pledge tomorrow with our guest of honor, Sam Myers, Her Majesty's Deputy Trade Commissioner to Asia Pacific, and Mr. Farouz Nadar from the UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei. And for those organizations here that you're representing who have not signed up for the pledge, you may do so on our website. You can check it out on climateactionweek.bmcc.org.my. And I want to encourage all of you to be part of this journey. As mentioned by the panelists, we need more collaboration, we need more engagement and partnerships to make change in this important topic of climate change. So please do visit the website and sign up for the remaining 3 more sessions of webinars that we will have tomorrow and on Friday. So with that, thank you once again to all speakers, and our appreciation goes out to our climate action partner again, IPMUDA and ICAEW, for co-organizing this webinar. And thank you very much, all of you. Stay safe. See you all in the next webinar.